All right, let's talk about exponents. An exponent is a different type of math operation. You may be used to adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, but now it's time to add one more. Don't worry though, it's closely tied to multiplication and fairly easy to do once you understand what it means. So you know how multiplication is the same thing as repeated addition? For example, 4 times 3 is the same thing as adding 4 3 times. 4 plus 4 plus 4. Well, exponents are a math operation that tells us to take a number and multiply it by itself a certain number of times. So basically, it's repeated multiplication. Let's first look at an exponent example and talk about how it is written. This is an exponent. The 3 is what they call the base, and the 4 is what they call the exponent index. The base tells you what number you will be multiplying, and the exponent index tells you how many times to multiply it. So in this example, it is telling you to take the number 3 and multiply it by itself 4 times. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. If we were to actually do that computation, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. The base is always the bigger number, and the exponent will always be raised up and smaller in size. So before we move on to some more examples, let's talk about writing and reading exponents, as there are several ways you can refer to them. From the example we just showed, you could say this was 3 to the 4th power, 3 to the 4th, or 3 raised to the 4th. All of these are correct. I just want to make you aware that there are many different ways you can read and write it. There are, however, two exponents that are said a little bit different, and they are: you could say this as 5 to the 2nd power, but you may hear it commonly referred to as 5 squared. Why is it called squared? Well, basically, if you were looking to find the area of a square, you would multiply the length times width to come up with that answer. And a square has equal sides. So to find the area of a square, you would multiply a number by itself to get that answer. Now that was just fun information, just so you know the exponent index is 2 and it is read as squared. Then there's this one. You could say 5 to the 3rd power, or you will hear it being called 5 cubed. This is very similar to the one we just talked about, but if you wanted to find the volume of a cube, which is 3-dimensional, you would need to multiply length times width times height to find it. And since a cube has all sides equal also, here it would be 5 times 5 times 5. Or you could just remember that the exponent index of 3 is referred to as cubed. If you aren't familiar with area and volume yet, don't worry about it. Just remember what I told you about cubed and squared. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's go over some examples of what we just learned. Let's look at the following 4 exponents and figure out how to solve for them. Here we would say 5 to the 3rd power, 5 to the 3rd, or 5 cubed. Written out in long form, this equals 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is 125. Number 2, we would say this as 4 to the 2nd power, or 4 squared. Written out in long form, this equals 4 times 4, which is 16. Let's look at number 3. We would say this as 2 to the 6th power, or just 2 to the 6th. It represents 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64. And finally, 3 to the 5th power, or 3 to the 5th. 3 raised to the 5th power. It simply means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81, times 3 is 243. So basically that is it for an introduction to exponents. We'll build upon this in the next video when we start looking at the powers of 10. If you want some more practice with exponents, head on over to improvemath.com/additional resources and snag a free worksheet. Thanks for watching.